Hi, this is Naomi with Sword and Steel, and today we are going to be checking out the Khainite Slaughter-Coven, as in the Daughters of Khaine Battleforce. Today, we are going to check out what each model looks like, what their weapon options are, any assembly issues that I might have, or assembly tips that I have, including the fact that one of these guys can be assembled as a Cities of Sigmar unit, so you want to avoid doing that by accident. And anything else that I happen to come up with, perhaps a few assembly tips as well as painting tips, because these are some pretty models. So this box set has the least savings amongst the battle forces for this year, but it still saves you approximately 27% of the cost of buying the models separately. And at the moment, the points value of this kit is approximately 860 to 940 points, depending on the units you choose to play. Now, let's start with the Doomfire Warlocks. So these are actually built as the Dark Riders. I would not suggest this for Daughters of Khaine army, but I wanted to make certain that you were aware. So these Dark Riders are actually Cities of Sigmar Dark Elves, so you can't use them in a Daughters of Khaine army. So what you want to do is build the other variant, which I've already built in this video. The assembly guide will tell you how to build either variant, so just stick with the Doomfire Warlock option. So as I show off the Doomfire Warlocks from my previous video, let me just give you some notes on what I found about these miniatures. They are an older miniature, relatively speaking, so you may find that they don't quite fit as snugly as some of the other models do. So dry fitting to see how they will come together before you add any glue is important. This also happens when they sculpt it so that any of the heads can fit on any of the models, and any of the upper torsos can fit on any of the lower bodies. So expect to have to use layers of very thin plastic glue to cover up join lines, and you just do that layer by layer, letting each layer dry before doing the next, and literally the lines will disappear. Also, the lower body of the rider and the horse are not separate, so you won't be able to paint them separately. You can keep their upper bodies assembled, but separate from their lower bodies if you like, but I wouldn't really suggest that because attaching their reins, which is in their rider's hands, to their horses is just so much easier to do if you don't have to worry about paint. The next kit to show off is the Witch Elves or Sisters of Slaughter. I should mention that only the Dark Riders, the Dark Rider / Doomfire Warlocks, create something that's not in Daughters of Khaine. So whichever other variant you want to go with. They're all Daughters of Khaine. That was just a very strange situation. So between the two, I chose Sisters of Slaughter, which is the whips and the angry looking masks, and you have to choose whether their other hand is wielding a sacrificial knife or a bladed buckler. There are rules for each of those options, so make sure you know which one you want before assembling them. The models themselves, there's 2 sprues of 5, so 10 altogether, but 2 of them will look the same, that they'll have the same pose and body, except for you can choose whichever head you want to go on whichever model, so you can change them up that way. I can't stress this enough. Use a fresh blade for cleaning up the sprue bits. Every one of these models have tiny little parts. You're going to have a little bit of difficulty handling them. There is unfortunately no way around it, so you're just gonna have to be patient and get some tweezers while you're at it. Much like many of these models, I suggest putting a little bit of very thin plastic glue on the model to attach the pieces together in their proper place, and then after the pieces have dried enough to stay in position without support, you then further strengthen the bond by applying a thin layer or 2 more at the join. This makes it such that you're not going to be oozing out extra melted plastic on your miniature. You'll be able to completely control where that plastic glue goes. The heads of the Witch Elves are heavy for the join because of all their hair, so I suggest keeping close attention to make certain they stay where you put them until they have dried. Next, we have the Blood Sisters or Blood Stalkers. The Blood Stalkers wield the bows, and the leader has an adorable little familiar called a bloodworm. And if you look closely, you'll notice that their bows are actually snakes. That's pretty cute. If you choose the Blood Sisters, they wield glaives and have those fierce masks, and the leader is holding a heart out in her hand. Small note, when building the leader, the guide calls her mask 70B, but the sprue says it's 9B, just for your reference. Now, if you haven't seen contrast paint at work yet, you should do yourself a favor when painting the scales, at least of these models, and prime these models with white or cream like Wraithbone, and use a contrast paint on them over those scales. They will come out so pretty. Then, after you do the scales and see how nice they come out, you may consider doing their flesh that way too. For Khainite Heartrenders or Life Takers, they are similar to the previous models in that you can build them 2 different ways, and the difference is solely based on their faces and their weapons. I would consider these being among the last models you build because of the curves and the wings and the little bits that require at least some experience assembling to be done properly. These were built in the form of the Khainite Life Takers, which wield sickles. The Heartrenders are the ones with the masks, and they wield the javelins. Bat wings are so fun to paint, and if you pay attention to how light would go through a wing, and that more would go through the center of the wing and less towards the bones, you can easily make some beautiful wings in very little time. And lastly, we have the model that is 7 models in one, the Cauldron. I do not suggest assembling this guy completely before painting, and I do suggest putting all of these heroes on a base each. Make them hang out with a shrine if you don't know how to magnetize, because that way you get the most out of the one model. Okay, so this model can be the Blood Rack Shrine, which is the Medusa and this mirror, like that. It also has shrine keepers that on this one are masked, which is how I assembled them. That means that I have an Avatar of Khaine to field alone, a Slaughter Queen to field alone, and a Hag Queen to field alone. Or, alternatively, I could field this shrine as a Hag Queen on Cauldron of Blood, which leaves me with a Slaughter Queen and a Blood Rack Medusa to field. Technically, the companions, these little ladies, are supposed to be witch elves, not shrine keepers, but I see that being unimportant, really, because the model can only be a Hag Queen on Cauldron of Blood because of these 2 models here. So no one is going to pay attention to the other ones. Alternatively, you can field it as a Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood, leaving you with a Blood Rack Medusa and a Hag Queen to field alone. So the one model can be a bunch of different things as long as you base the models, which is what I would do 100%. A couple things to note about actually building this model. I did not add the chains that go along here because I felt they didn't really add to the model's appearance and that they would inevitably break off, so I didn't. And you have to be careful assembling the cauldron itself because earlier placements of pieces really affect whether you can attach later pieces properly or not. The underside of piece 83 has indents to fit all 6 of these pieces. So you have to make sure you build these pieces just right. There are pieces that will look nearly identical, but you can't put them in the wrong place. Thankfully, every piece fits exactly where it's supposed to go, so as you're dry fitting, you can figure out where it goes before you attempt to glue it. But I do suggest being very careful and looking at that assembly guide and only doing one thing after the other. I hope you are already aware that you should never cut off all of the pieces from a sprue, but this one is really the case. Oh, and a side note, piece number 61 is actually 60 and piece number 60 is 61. These are pretty straightforward to paint. Super straightforward. You prime them white or cream, as I said, and they become very straightforward because the contrast paints work really nicely for scales. They work really nicely for skin, no matter what color skin you choose. I have so many videos I could make. So many videos I could make. So little time. I'm going to do a few more battle forces. I don't think I'll be doing all 15, to be honest. I'm going to be doing a few more. If they're still available, I will be doing them. I want to do some painting, so you can expect that in a bit. Okay, bye. Thank you very much, patrons, for allowing this channel to grow all the way to what it is today. I really appreciate the support that you have been giving me, and I hope you have a fantastic Christmas. I'm sure I will be seeing you again before then, but just in case, I hope you have a fantastic Christmas. It's a bit early, but if anyone is contemplating what to do for Valentine's Day, the snake ladies have hearts hanging off their belts. I mean, that sounds super romantic.